The Apache cut through the darkness without sound, its rotor wash lost in the folds of desert wind. From the outside, it was nothing more than a shadow moving through deeper shadows, a silhouette riding just above the ground. Inside, two women operated in a partnership that worked like a metronome, a silent shield for a team of commandos trapped behind enemy lines. But the Apache wasn't just a flight vehicle for them, it was their last hope. This wasn't for fame or for applause, it was simply for doing what needed to be done. Two women, a helicopter, and a team of commandos. In the silence of the desert, an invisible force fought against an unseen threat. The soul of our channel is the silent heroes who change the world without leaving a trace. If these kinds of stories deeply move you, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell for more. The Apache cut through the darkness without sound, its rotor wash lost in the folds of desert wind. From the outside, it was nothing more than a shadow moving through deeper shadows, a silhouette riding just above the ground. Inside the cockpit, dim green arcs of instrument light painted across both helmets. Jessie leaned slightly into the cyclic, her left hand steady, guiding the airframe with movements too subtle for anyone else to see. She wasn't flying the aircraft, she was wearing it. Riley sat behind her, visor down, unmoving except for the small, deliberate press of her thumb along the edge of the console. The targeting system had already synced to the feed from the sensor pod. Riley's monitor flickered with low-contrast heat signatures drifting in and out of the edges of her scope. Most of them were nothing, animals, shapes without mass or motion. But the compound ahead was different. That one bled sharp outlines and artificial heat. She could already see its rhythm. They had gone lights out 15 minutes earlier, just past a low ridge marker designated Checkpoint Lima. Now the Apache was running passive, its signature low, gliding above a shallow ravine in total radio silence. Jessie had confirmed visual on the grid and checked the valley line on her display. Then she stopped speaking. Riley didn't expect any more words. She didn't need them. Breaker team moved along the ground below, a 12-person Marine squad in staggered formation working in pairs. They were spread wide, using shadow and depth to stay hidden. Their infrared strobes pulsed every 15 seconds in a short, coded blink, barely visible, just enough for Riley to follow. They moved with practiced stillness. One by one, they slipped through the dry channel and across open rock, heading east toward the compound's outer wall. The Apache kept its distance and its silence. Riley adjusted her optics, narrowing the thermal field. She picked out a rooftop on the northeast corner of the compound. One figure stood motionless near a large antenna post. His heat bloom was consistent with a human standing at rest. She scanned for movement. None. No pacing. No radio use. Possibly bored, possibly sharp. Too early to tell. She did not mark him. Not yet. The Marines were still a few hundred meters away. Timing was everything. In the front seat, Jessie gently pitched the nose of the Apache a few degrees to the left. The motion was imperceptible except to someone inside. She had realigned Riley's scope without being asked. That was how it worked. Between them, decisions weren't passed by voice. They were exchanged in motion. Every angle Jessie offered was one Riley had already considered. Every adjustment was its own confirmation. The radio crackled once, low and tight, a short encrypted call from Breaker Team. They were in final position, approaching the outer boundary of the exclusion zone. Riley responded with 2 clicks, her voice unused, her eyes fixed to the scope. Below them, dust moved without form. The aircraft dipped slightly, hugging a fold in the ridge, descending into deeper ground. Altitude read out steady. No alarm, no reaction from the compound. The target area was larger than expected. 3 nested walls surrounded a central structure. No visible tower. At least 2 overlapping security sectors based on light patterns and patrol pacing. Riley didn't need to count the guards. She already had a mental map. Each rooftop, each sentry path, each zone of overlapping vision. They were all stored, not with labels but with shapes. Where one moved, another rotated. Between those movements, there were small voids, places of pause. That was where Breaker Team would pass. The same rooftop figure reappeared in her scope, still motionless, still near the antenna, still too close to the approach vector Breaker Team would take after breaching the first wall. Riley marked him in her interface, a passive box locked over his form. She did not fire. The Marines weren't in danger yet. Her crosshairs hovered without urgency. Jessie shifted again, rolling to starboard with a shallow rightward drift. She brought the Apache just a few meters higher, enough to grant Riley a clean angle past the northern wall. No conversation, just correction, just trust. The systems hummed in the background, low and constant, an audio floor beneath breath and thought. Nothing pulsed, nothing blinked. Everything inside the cockpit was stable. Jesse adjusted their elevation again, holding it just over 200 feet above ground level. The aircraft slowed into a steady lateral float. Forward motion was muted. They had become part of the night. The sentry below shifted his weight slightly, then resumed standing. Riley caught the motion, recalculated wind and angle, and laid her thumb flat across the firing control. The shot was ready. The crosshairs were stable, but she did not take it. Not yet. The mission hadn't started. One moment he was leaning on the antenna mast, weight on his left leg, his eyes drifting down into the compound interior. The next, there was no moment. Riley tapped the fire control switch and a single round lanced through the night. Silent from this distance, final in its outcome. The silhouette folded and disappeared behind the wall's parapet. No alarm, no reaction. Riley held her breath for 1 full second, confirmed no movement from the adjacent rooftop, and let her fingers release pressure from the controls. A soft click came through the comms. "Breaker team." They had eyes on the body drop. One word followed in a whisper. "Clear." Jesse adjusted the airframe with a slow pedal slide, angling them northeast. The Apache drifted as if caught in a quiet thermal, its motion smooth and low. Riley's scope reset, panning left across the outer wall. 2 figures appeared in staggered motion along the interior corridor, both walking the same direction. She watched them pass into a blind arc behind a generator shed. Not a threat yet. Below, the Marines had begun to cross the final stretch before the outer wall. One by one, their IR pulses flicked into her vision. Each movement was coordinated and cautious. Riley tracked their spread, noting how the team lead paused behind a rock formation to reassess angles. These weren't rookies. Every footstep was earned. Jesse kept them steady, letting terrain dictate the line. No hovering, no sudden lifts. The Apache slipped along the ridge like a shadow with intent. It was not in command, it was in sync. Another rooftop appeared. Single target, stationary, crouched low with a bipod weapon resting on the edge. Riley slowed her breath. She measured wind drift, confirmed height offset, then fired again. The round hit center mass. No scream, no alert. The body rolled backward and vanished from view. Another click on comms. Clear. There was no discussion between Jesse and Riley. No adjustments called out. Each slight bank Jesse made brought Riley's scope to a new sector before it was even needed. Riley's hands never left the controls, but they never clenched either. This was the tempo. Pulse, pause, fire, confirm. Nothing rushed. Breaker team reached the base of the wall. Riley could see the lead Marine pull a folded ladder from his pack. Another moved forward with a signal jammer, placing it low against the wall's edge to cut surveillance loops. The others spread wide, covering arcs. Every move was mirrored above. Jesse began a slow roll left, clearing Riley's view of the compound's southeast quadrant. Riley noted 5 bodies in that sector. 2 were patrolling, 3 were posted. One sat with his back to the wall, smoking. Another leaned against a fixed machine gun emplacement that hadn't been fired in months. She scanned the angles. None were directly observing the breach path. She let them be. Below, the ladder went up. Marines began to scale one by one, their weapons tight, their steps placed with intention. Riley could have fired a dozen times in those 60 seconds. She didn't. The real skill was knowing when not to. Jesse's fingers tapped against the collective twice, a habit more than a signal, and Riley felt the Apache adjust beneath her. The aircraft leaned into the wind just enough to keep the targeting pod aligned through a cross current. Riley didn't thank her. Jesse didn't expect it. On the far wall, a single sentry emerged from a bunker and began walking west along the parapet. He moved without urgency. Rifle slung, scanning below only occasionally. Riley watched. If he turned early, the breach would be exposed. If he kept pace, he'd pass out of view before the Marines reached the second ladder. The sentry stopped. Riley's thumb rested on the fire control. He turned slightly, not enough to look down, but enough to shift posture. He pulled something from a chest pocket. Cigarettes. He lit one, took a slow drag, and leaned back against the battlement. Riley waited 3 more seconds. Then she fired. Clear. Breaker team moved again. Half were already over the wall and covering the second half's climb. 2 Marines swept the corridor ahead with IR laser checks. No movement, no response. The Apache stayed high and angled, its silhouette invisible against the jagged skyline. Riley swept the scope west again. Movement. Two sentries were walking in an offset formation, moving parallel to the breach wall. It wasn't a patrol, it was a shift handoff or a routine change. Their paths converged briefly. For a few seconds they would cross within the same fire zone. Riley could take one, but the other would react. Sound mattered. Time mattered more. She waited. Jesse held altitude, holding the Apache still against a slight updraft. No input, no shift. Trust flowed between them without weight. The two sentries reached the overlap point. One paused to scratch his shoulder. The other kept walking. Riley clicked her tongue once, mentally marking the distance. When the second passed just inside range, she fired twice in quick succession. Both targets dropped. There was a pause, then the voice returned, low and final, clear. Riley noticed a flicker in the thermal feed, small, erratic, moving faster than a patrol pace. She adjusted the zoom. The heat signature resolved into a man sprinting across the inner courtyard, then disappearing behind a wall. That wasn't routine. A few seconds later, another followed, then a third. They weren't in sync. There was no spacing. Jesse's voice came through the comms, calm and exact. "You seeing this?" Riley nodded instinctively, even though Jesse couldn't see her. "QRF scramble," Riley said flatly. She shifted her focus to the main corridor leading from the central building. A pair of side doors opened simultaneously, and figures poured out, 10, maybe more. They moved with purpose. Rifles were up, scanning, not yet shooting, but looking for something they weren't supposed to find. The stealth window was closing. Breaker team had cleared the outer breach and was pushing through the second ring of buildings. Their movement slowed, more cautious now. The Marine team leader came through on an encrypted channel, his voice low but sharper than before. "We've been seen, adjusting route, requesting Overwatch priority east," Riley acknowledged. Jesse angled the aircraft in a tight bank, pulling them along the southeast corner of the compound. The terrain narrowed here with only 20 meters of clearance between the rooftop and the ridgeline. Jesse dropped altitude just enough to keep the Apache beneath a rooftop line while maintaining Riley's sightline. The cockpit changed. The slow, fluid coordination of the first phase was gone. This was edge work now. Riley moved faster, scanning rooftops, checking corners, and reprioritizing targets every 10 seconds. Her HUD bloomed with thermal data, contacts bleeding into one another, angles tightening. She isolated 3 moving heat signatures running a flanking path west of the Marines, close enough to become a problem. She tagged them, fired twice, and 2 were down, with 1 vanishing behind a shipping container. Jesse kept the Apache rolling left, pushing for clearance, she said evenly. Riley swept the scope. "They're reacting, but still blind." Her voice had changed, becoming quieter and more clipped. Her hands weren't shaking, but the tension had settled in. This was what she trained for. Not cold elimination, not plans. This was chaos with intention. Gunfire crackled over the ground team's comms, suppressed bursts, and 1 full auto. Contact had come. Breaker team was exchanging rounds near a fuel shed on the inner ring. Riley switched focus mid-scan. She found 2 rooftops with direct angles into the Marines' corridor. She took 1 shot, then a second. "Rooftop threat neutralized," she said, more to Jesse than anyone else. "Copy," Jesse replied, pushing left for more. The Apache dipped and swung in an arc barely above the tree line. The blades cut through the dry wind, and the engine note rose as Jesse added torque to climb past a narrow defile. Riley's scope reoriented with the pitch, the HUD tilting but never losing the target field. She found another group, 4 this time, advancing from the motor pool. Weapons were up, with a tactical spread. This was a trained response. Riley tagged the first and fired. Jesse leveled the frame, giving Riley the micro-stability she needed. The next 2 targets dropped within 2 seconds. The fourth ducked behind a half wall and disappeared. Riley let him go. He was no longer in position to affect the Marine's path. Jesse's voice came again, steady and low. "Eyes south, new thermal bloom, 10 careers off." Riley shifted. Her HUD showed it too. 3 bodies converging on a point behind the storage shed. It was a different heat pattern with heavier equipment and cylindrical shapes slung across their backs. "Launchers, RPG team," Riley said. Jesse adjusted their angle again, the Apache flattening into a side drift to avoid breaking cover. "Holding stable, you're good." Riley counted the shapes. All 3 were prepping tubes, moving with intent. She took the first shot just as one of them raised the launcher onto his shoulder. He dropped backward, his heat signature flickering, and then extinguishing. The second moved to return fire. but Jesse had already dipped the nose, pulling the Apache into a shallow dive to break the line of sight. Riley reacquired, fired. The second went down hard. The third was still moving, running laterally now, disappearing into a shadow line behind stacked crates. Riley held fire. Jesse circled them wider, shifting east to give her a fresh angle. They came out of the pass and re-entered open space for a heartbeat. Riley didn't waste it. She took the shot as the third figure broke cover. He fell forward, unmoving. Breaker Team's radio came alive again. RPG threat down. We're advancing. Riley exhaled, but only once. Her scope kept moving. Her HUD was a crowded constellation of heat, lines and markers. The pattern was no longer symmetrical. The rhythm of the compound had broken. Jesse's voice came again, calm and quiet, like a metronome timing a song that only they knew. Next sector, North Wall 3 on the move. I'll handle it. And she did. Breaker Team stalled just short of the final breach wall. Riley could see them taking cover behind a low retaining berm. Weapons were up, unmoving. Their squad lead was flat against a steel tank, his hand on the comms, no motion forward. Something had changed. Riley, we've got no go on the east side. The voice came through low and clipped. Unknown Overwatch asset on the roof, looks fixed, feels heavier than rifles. Confirming we're pinned. Riley shifted her scope. The rooftop in question was only partially visible from her current angle. She widened the field and pulled back thermal contrast until the outline became clear. There it was, a compact, fixed-position anti-air mount tucked behind a curved concrete lip. The elevation motor was warm. This was not standard patrol hardware, not on the pre-mission photos. Turret, west corner, elevated line of sight, feeds 2 sectors. They can't move forward until it's gone, she said. Jesse was already banking them left, pulling into a shallow climb that gave Riley better range. Options? Jesse asked, keeping her eyes on the altitude. The terrain was narrowing again, the ridgeline tighter. Hellfire, narrow angle. I've got 2 left, but the shot's steep. Can you make it? Riley didn't answer right away. Her scope was tracking movement around the turret. A single operator, maybe 2. One was adjusting the elevation arc, still idle, still scanning. The angle wasn't great, but she could make the shot if the turret fully locked on them first. She would need a clean silhouette. Only if they paint us first, she said. Jesse understood instantly. She rolled the Apache back toward cover, leveling out just behind a sloping ridge wall. Give me a count, Jesse said. Her voice was steady, but her harness straps creaked as she tightened them down. This wasn't a drift maneuver. This would put them in exposure. Riley ran a quick system check. Remaining payload, 2 Hellfires, 1 flare pack. No 30mm loaded on this vector. This would be 1 shot only. Ready in 15, Riley said, locking in the coordinates manually. She marked the turret's base, adjusted for wind shear, and gave herself a mental track on escape vectors. The angle would be close, 5 degrees of error, and the missile would glance off the cover. She wouldn't get a second attempt. Jesse let them drift for another 10 seconds, keeping low behind the ridgeline. Then she pressed forward on the cyclic and pushed them into motion. The Apache rose cleanly into the skyline. The moment they crossed the ridge, Riley saw it. The turret shifting, its barrel realigning with intent, the motor rotating fast. The silhouette grew sharp. They've got us, she said quietly. Hold steady, Jesse replied, banking right to give her 1 more second. Riley's breath slowed. Her thumb touched the fire control, holding just shy of pressure. She visualized the arc, factored in the wind angle, and rechecked the confirmation light. 5, 4, 3. The turret clicked into full lock. 2, she fired. The Hellfire launched in a silent pulse, trailing light for only an instant before it vanished toward the rooftop. Jesse rolled hard to port, dipping the Apache back beneath the skyline. Riley kept her eyes on the screen. The missile curved slightly, then struck low at the turret's base. The screen flashed white. Impact. A ripple of debris pushed outward as the turret disintegrated. Concrete dust plumed upward, the heat signature flaring, then going dark. Sparks lifted from the edge and tumbled down into shadow. Breaker Team's comms flared to life seconds later. Turret down. We're moving. Riley sat back in her seat. The HUD cleared slowly. No secondary contacts. No more motion on the rooftop. She watched for a few seconds longer to be sure. Jesse didn't speak right away. She leveled them out in a wide arc, keeping to the southern perimeter of the compound. Her breathing was steady, but she didn't look away from her altimeter. The move had worked. They had baited a gun and won. Riley reached down and cleared the firing queue. 1 missile left. Everything else would be angle and instinct. The silence between them wasn't tense. It was full. Intent had passed cleanly between them, spoken without waiting. Jesse had offered the risk. Riley had answered with the shot. There had never been a second option. Nice angle, Jesse said finally. Thanks for the stall, Riley replied. On the ground, Breaker Team pushed past the final breach wall. Their infrared signals blinked steadily, no longer frozen. Riley watched as the lead Marine signaled 2 more forward, covering arcs as they moved into the inner sector. The team had momentum again. The whole compound didn't know it yet, but the breach was happening. One of the Marines paused at the shattered rooftop and looked up briefly. He didn't wave, he just moved on. Jesse pulled them into a higher orbit, giving Riley a broader scope. There were still signatures moving below, but none with long sightlines. The rooftop that had once pinned the team was now a scorched gap in the perimeter. One problem solved. The turret hadn't been on any map, not on satellite imagery, not on the recon brief. Someone had added it later. It didn't matter now. Still good on that last Hellfire? Jesse asked. Still good, Riley confirmed. But I don't plan to use it unless we have to. Copy that, Jesse replied, holding the angle in the glow of the cockpit. Neither woman blinked. They simply worked. The Marines were in. Riley tracked their heat signatures as they cleared the final breach and fanned out through the central corridor. Muzzle flashes sparked in short bursts along the interior walls. Sporadic return fire lit up her thermal feed. There was no pretense. Now the compound was awake, and everyone inside was trying to either regroup or run. Jesse brought the Apache into a hover just above stall point. The nose tipped forward at a sharp downward angle. The blades strained in the heat, cutting through shifting air currents above the rooftop line. Riley's targeting scope stuttered slightly, compensating for the micro drifts. They were holding position for a reason. This was where the last angle had to come from. Hold 5 seconds, Riley said. Roger, Burns climbing, Jesse answered, her voice flat. Through the thermal haze, Riley saw the rooftop guards moving fast. 2 ran toward the corner stairwell, weapons ready. 1 paused behind a vent stack and shouldered a rifle toward the courtyard below. Breaker Team was still moving through the open. Seconds mattered. Riley took the shot. The first burst dropped the rooftop gunner instantly. She swung the feed left, zeroed in on the 2 stairwell guards, and fired again. Her round caught one in the chest. The other stumbled, tried to duck, then vanished from the feed. She held her fire. Still active, she said. Lower level, possibly re-engaging. Jesse didn't reply. She pulled the Apache into a slow rotation to give Riley a new angle, holding them right at the limits of controlled hover. Her left hand shook slightly as she adjusted the collective. Riley didn't see it, but she could hear the difference in Jesse's breathing. Short and shallow. Not panic, just the edge. Backstare, Riley said. Target moving fast, close to ground team. She tracked the heat bloom, followed its arc down through an alley between 2 prefab storage units. One of the Marines crossed into view. The hostile raised his rifle. Riley tapped the trigger. Threat down, she said. Breaker Team pushed ahead, moving into the interior structure with quick, tight formations. Riley switched optics, scanning for new signatures. The scope was fogging slightly from the heat inside the cockpit. Her gloves were damp. She wiped one lens edge with the edge of her sleeve. A distant roar echoed through the compound. Riley shifted scope. A vehicle pickup size was moving along the rear wall, its backlights visible through heat shimmer. One figure was inside, possibly more. Vehicle heading north perimeter, she said. Not marked, not allied. Looks like exfil. Jesse didn't hesitate. Can you stop it? Not from this angle. I need to shift. Jesse pushed the nose forward, accelerating just enough to clear the rooftop and give Riley the field she needed. The airframe shuttered against thermal drag. Jesse watched the artificial horizon gauge dip, then level. Got it, Riley said. She tagged the vehicle, adjusted for distance. The crosshair pulsed once. She fired. The round clipped the front axle. The truck swerved, hit a berm, and rolled once before coming to rest in a haze of smoke and dust. Its frame buckled as it tipped onto the passenger side, then slammed flat again. 2 figures staggered out, both disarmed by the crash. One limped, the other crawled a few feet and stopped moving. Neither posed a threat. Vehicle stopped. No follow-up needed, she said. Fuel levels dropped past 1/4. Jesse pulled the Apache back into a high float. Riley's screen showed fewer and fewer contacts. Movement was slowing. Fire from the defenders was breaking apart. There were no new threats, no surprise elements, just a few scattered holdouts, all buried in the wrong corners of a collapsing defense. Breaker team cleared the central building. No transmission yet. Riley followed them on thermal, tracking each door breach, each hallway clearance. Then the call came. Flat. Final. Objective secured. Target down. No friendly casualties. Jessie exhaled once. She brought the Apache into a slow climb, pulling away from the heat bubble rising off the compound. Riley shut down her targeting suite and leaned back slightly. Her shoulders ached. Her hands were steady, but it took effort. Her headset buzzed faintly with the sound of Jessie's final system check clicks. The black silhouette of the Apache held over the drifting smoke below. A handful of orange flares still burned along the edges of the courtyard. Debris littered the rooftops. Rooftop sentries were gone. No movement crossed their feed. The mission had reached its end. Jessie lifted her left hand once, flexed the fingers, then let it fall gently back to the controls. She said nothing. She didn't need to. They just moved. The ridge caught the early light in dull streaks. Washed pale by the dust, the Apache kicked up as it settled into a crouched hover. Jessie held the cyclic low, her feet locked and her eyes unmoving until the skids touched. The airframe gave one last subtle sway, then stilled. Rotor wash scattered loose gravel across the ridge before fading into heavy stillness. Riley didn't speak. She moved her hands slowly, powering down systems one at a time. The glow from her optics faded in descending order, targeting suite, display link, stabilizer feed, until the cockpit dimmed to a soft pre-dawn haze. Her visor stayed lifted just high enough to see the dying screen lights. She didn't take it off. Jessie leaned into the checklist. Fuel readout was low but within range, structural alert was clear, and engine temperature was settling under 100 cruise. She ran each switch with quiet familiarity, then let her hands rest on her thighs. The headset pressed against her temple. She didn't remove that either. Down below, the Marine convoy wound through the flats. Dust followed them like smoke. No sirens, no lights, just the low thrum of tires over sand and scattered rock. A single vehicle slowed as it neared the ridge's base. One of the Marines, helmeted and with gear stripped down to essentials, stepped out and looked up toward the Apache. He didn't wave. He didn't call out. He just stood for a moment, then gave a slow nod toward the canopy. Riley saw it. She didn't move. The Marine climbed back in. The convoy resumed. Jessie adjusted her posture slightly. Looks like they made it. Riley pressed one final key. The last indicator light blinked off. Neither of them said anything for a while. Outside the canopy, the world was turning bronze. Sunlight skimmed the horizon, still far off but rising. The Apache sat still. The fuselage was streaked with soot and sand. Rotor blades creaked faintly as they cooled. The dust on the glass blurred the sky into a soft wash. Riley still hadn't removed her gloves. Her hands rested against her thighs, fingers curled just enough to hold pressure. The tension hadn't fully left her body. It never did. Not right away. Jessie exhaled through her nose and glanced at the horizon line. She rolled her neck once, then ran through a second set of system checks, slower this time. She didn't need to. It was routine habit. After what they'd just done, it was something to fill the quiet. They didn't debrief. Not here. Not now. The cockpit held a kind of sacred stillness in the aftermath. Not reverent. Not heroic. Just still. The kind earned when everything had gone exactly as needed, without reward, without witness. Jessie's voice came finally, quiet and clipped. "We don't talk about it." Riley looked ahead, her visor reflecting back the ridgeline in the early light. Her voice didn't shift. "We hit every shot." Jessie nodded once. Outside, the sun was starting to warm the ridge. The dust had settled. The convoy was gone. The Apache sat unmoving, its shape a silhouette against the slow, brightening edge of dawn. No one else would know what happened up there, but the Marines did. That was enough. Riley reached for her kneeboard, flipped it open, and reviewed the strike confirmations out of habit. Even though everything had been logged, the ink from her last entry had smeared faintly in the heat, but she didn't correct it. There was nothing more to add. She left the book open beside the throttle and turned to check the mount on the canopy rail. One of the headset cables had twisted loose during the final maneuver, dangling slightly near her shoulder. She clipped it back in place, slow and deliberate. These moments, tiny repairs, adjustments and closures were the final steps. Ritual, not repair. The faint tick of the cooling rotor system echoed through the cockpit. Jessie didn't speak. She watched the horizon with a blank stillness that wasn't detachment, just control. Her fingers brushed the edge of the control panel once, then returned to rest on the frame. If this story stayed with you, Take a moment to reflect. Who are the quiet ones in your world? Share your thoughts in the comments and follow for more stories that honor strength without spectacle.